The chamber of the Galactic Council was not made for sound. It was designed to absorb it, to swallow the echoes of 1,000 different voices from 1,000 different worlds. The walls, a dull, non-reflective gray, seemed to drink the light from the floating holographic orbs that illuminated the central stage. In the vast, tiered seating that spiraled upwards into shadow, the representatives of the galaxy's great species sat in silent clusters. Their forms were many. Some were bundles of floating membranes, others were insectoid and still. A few bore a passing resemblance to humanity, but with skin of fine scales or eyes that were pure, dark orbs. All attention was fixed on the small, solitary figure standing within a circle of soft blue light on the stage. Her name was Myri. She was 17 years old. She wore a simple, gray jumpsuit, the standard issue for all detainees on the council station. Her black hair was tied back neatly. She stood very straight, her hands clasped lightly in front of her. She looked small, not just because the chamber was enormous, but because she was alone. There were no guards flanking her. She posed no physical threat. This was not that kind of trial. From a high observation booth, human diplomatic attaché Min watched, his stomach a hard knot. He was a young man with a face that was meant to look friendly and open, a useful tool in diplomacy. Now it was just pale. His palms were damp where they pressed against the cool railing. He had filed the appeals. He had cited every minor protocol. He had begged for more time. His requests had been processed, stamped, and dismissed without comment. His role now was to witness, to show that humanity would comply even with this. The accuser was the Carixi ambassador, Vale. The Carixi were a tall, slender species, their bodies like polished stone of deep burgundy. They had no visible mouths. Their speech was a soft, chiming sound that emanated from their broad chests, translated instantly by the chamber's systems. Vale stood at an imposing podium, its surface glowing with data. "The facts are not in dispute," Vale chimed, the tone calm, melodic, and utterly cold. The human child, Myri, was on a cultural observation visa on the Carixi frontier world of Xylos. She was explicitly instructed, as all outsiders are, on the sacred silence. When a Carixi enters the final phase of life, they must be isolated. All sensory input, all contact, all presence from outside the family unit is a poison to the spirit. It condemns them to wander between stars, unheard and grieving for eternity. A hologram flickered to life above Vale. It showed security footage from a dusty, red-hued street. An elderly Carixi, their stone-like skin cracked and faded, lay slumped against a wall. Their light was dimming. Then a figure entered the frame. Myri. She knelt. She opened a small medkit. She scanned the elder with a simple device. She did not try to move them. Instead, she took a cloth, dampened it, and carefully wiped the dust from the elder's face. Then, she did the unforgivable. She reached out and placed her bare human hand upon the elder's arm. She sat there, in the silent, red dust, holding the arm of a dying alien for 27 minutes until the light left them completely. "She touched him," Vale said, the chime now sharp, like cracked crystal. "She imposed her foreign biology, her chaotic human emotions, upon a sacred transition. Her compassion, as her species calls it, was a violent act. It has sparked outrage across our colonies. The family is shamed. The community is fractured. The principle of cultural sovereignty, the very foundation of this council, has been assaulted." In her circle of light, Myri did not look up at the hologram. She looked at her own hands, clasped together. A representative from the aquatic Pell, a being floating in a fluid-filled sphere, bubbled a question. What was her stated intention? Min leaned forward, a flicker of hope. This was the core of their weak defense. A legal aid, a human woman named Ga, spoke from a console. Her voice was strained but clear over the speakers. The detainee stated she recognized signs of neurological distress and systemic shutdown consistent with end-of-life pain in many carbon-based lifeforms. Her translator indicated the elder was emitting subsonic frequencies of distress. She attempted to provide palliative relief through physical contact, a proven human method of reducing anxiety. She stated she wished to offer comfort, to communicate that the elder was not alone. A wave of rustling, clicking, and soft chiming moved through the chamber. The concept was not just foreign. To many, it was bizarre, purposeful, non-instrumental touch. To an unrelated being, it was seen as primitive, invasive, irrational. The Toltec representative, a warrior species with bony ridges across their skull, spoke with a gravelly voice. Was the Carixi elder capable of refusing this comfort? Vale chimed immediately. He was in the final silence. Communication was impossible. It was a violation of a defenseless state. The argument continued, but the direction was clear. It was not about intent. It was about consequence. It was about the sheer, reckless danger of human subjectivity. Their messy, leaking empathy was a variable the ordered galaxy could not tolerate. Min heard the phrases repeated like a dark mantra: cultural contamination, emotional vector, uncontrolled anthropomorphic projection. The vote was called. It was swift. One by one, species representatives cast their symbolic lights. Blue for acquittal, red for condemnation. Min watched as a sea of red lights bloomed in the dark like poisonous flowers. The Pel, often sympathetic, voted red. The Toltec voted red. Even species humanity considered neutral voted red. The fear of setting a precedent, of allowing human feeling to override sacred law, was too great. The presiding counselor, a being of swirling gaseous light, condensed its form. The sentence is confirmed. The human, Myri, is found guilty of high cultural contamination and existential threat to a member species' spiritual integrity. Pursuant to Galactic Statute 7 Alpha, the sentence is public execution, to be carried out immediately via neural energy dispersion, broadcast to all member worlds. The sentence is irreversible. The words hung in the sound-absorbing air. Min's knees felt weak. He looked down at Myri. She had finally looked up. She was not looking at the council. She was looking at him in his high booth. Her face was calm, but her eyes were wide. She gave a very small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. Don't, it seemed to say, don't make it worse. Two uniformed council guards, their species unknown behind smooth helmets, approached her circle of light. They did not touch her. They simply motioned for her to follow. She turned, her movements stiff but controlled, and walked with them towards a low archway that had opened in the wall, leading deeper into the station. The blue light on the stage went out, leaving an empty space where a girl had stood. The chamber began to empty, the soft sounds of departing delegates already moving on to the next point of order. Min remained, gripping the railing, the metallic taste of failure filling his mouth. The execution was not in some far future. It was now. In minutes, the broadcast would begin, and the galaxy would watch a human girl die to teach humanity a lesson about staying in its place. He had 27 minutes. The room they put her in was not a cell, not exactly. It was a small, clean holding chamber with soft, rounded walls. There was a narrow bench and a slot for water. The air was cool and smelled of nothing at all. It was a place for waiting. Myri sat on the bench, her back against the wall. She held her own elbows, her fingers tight. The calm she had shown in the great chamber was gone now, worn away by the quiet. Here there was nothing to push against, only the certainty of the next few minutes. The door slid open with a whisper. A council guard walked in. He was tall and broad in his smooth, gray uniform, his face hidden behind a dark visor on his helmet. He carried no visible weapon, but everyone knew the guards held devices that could stop a heart or a brain with a silent signal. He was just another part of the machine. He stood by the door, which closed behind him. He was there to make sure she didn't do anything before the broadcast, to make sure she walked to the spot when it was time. Myri looked at the floor. She did not want to see the faceless guard. She wanted to think of home. She thought of her father, Junsu, in their small greenhouse on the research outpost. He would be tending to the alien lichen now, the kind that glowed blue in the dark. He had a way of talking to the plants, a low, steady hum. He said all living things fought to connect, to put down roots, even if the rock seemed barren. Does it hurt? Her own voice surprised her. It was small in the quiet room. The guard did not move. For a moment, she thought he hadn't heard, or that he was forbidden to speak. Then, his helmet tilted just a fraction. A voice came out, filtered and neutral. Does what hurt? The way I am going to die. The neural energy thing. There was another pause. The translation is imperfect. It disrupts the electrical signals of the central nervous system. It is very fast. It is designed to be efficient. Myri nodded, absorbing this. Efficient. She pulled her knees up to her chest. That's good, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Efficient is good. Silence filled the room again. But it was a different silence now. A question had been asked and answered. A line of communication, however thin, had been opened. The guard remained by the door, a statue. The Kirixi elder, Myri said after a while, her voice a little stronger. On the footage. His family. Are they okay? The riots Ambassador Vale talked about. I hope they were not hurt. The guard's head turned fully towards her now. The blank visor reflected the dim light of the room, showing only a distorted version of the small, hunched girl on the bench. You are asking about them? My father says actions have consequences, she said, resting her chin on her knees. I didn't mean to cause a consequence of pain. I just saw someone alone and in distress. My translator was picking up his frequencies. They were so sad and sharp. I couldn't just walk by. The law was clear, the guard stated, his tone without judgment, just fact. I know the law was clear, Myri said. She looked up at the visor, trying to imagine a face behind it. But he was scared. I could feel it. Is following a law more important than helping someone who is scared? The guard did not answer. He stood perfectly still. Myri sighed and looked back at her hands. She began to fiddle with her fingers, twisting them together. His name was Kale, she said softly. My translator parsed it from a subvocalization right at the end. Just a pulse. Kale. He stopped being scared. His frequencies, they just smoothed out into a long, quiet note. And then they faded. I think he understood. I think he knew he wasn't alone. She fell silent, lost in the memory of the red dust and the fading hum. A soft, mechanical click came from the guard. It was the sound of a seal releasing. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached up and removed his helmet. He was human. He was a man perhaps in his late 30s, with short, dark hair and a tired, solemn face. There were fine lines around his eyes. He looked at her not as a guard to a prisoner, but as one person to another. His name was Taejin. Myri stared, her breath catching. Why are you human? She asked, the question tumbling out before she could think. The council guard is a neutral service, Taejin said, his real voice lower and softer than the filtered one. It had a gentle, familiar cadence. They recruit from species that can withstand the station's atmosphere. Some humans volunteer. It is a job. It is order. He held the helmet under his arm. You should not think about Kale. You should think about yourself now. I don't want to, Myri said, her eyes glistening. If I think about me, I will be too scared to walk out there. If I think about him, it was a good thing. I know it was a good thing. That has to be my thought. That has to be the last one. Taejin watched her. He had seen many beings in this room. He had heard rage, bargaining, tears, and empty silence. He had never heard this. He reached into a small pocket on his uniform belt. His fingers closed around something. He hesitated, then stepped forward, crossing the small space. He knelt on one knee before her so he was not towering over her. He opened his hand. In his palm lay a small, intricate knot woven from dark red and blue cord. A made-up, a traditional Korean good luck charm. My daughter made this, he said quietly, before I left for this posting. She said it was to tie good fortune to me. He held it out to her. It is just a thing. But, take it. Myri looked from the charm to his face. Slowly, she unclenched her own hand and reached out. Her fingers were trembling. She took the tiny, woven knot. It was warm from his hand. She closed her fist around it, feeling the intricate bumps of the weave press into her palm. A physical anchor. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick. Taejin stood up. He did not put his helmet back on. "The broadcast will start soon. They will come for you. You will walk to a marked circle on the floor in the execution chamber. The beam will come from above. It will be fast." He was repeating the facts, but his tone was different now. It was a preparation, not just a report. Myri nodded, clutching the charm. "Will you be there?" "I will be at the door," he said. "My duty is to ensure you enter." She took a deep, shuddering breath and let it out. She stood up, smoothing her gray jumpsuit. She felt the small knot in her hand. "Tell your daughter," she started, then stopped. She shook her head. "No. Just thank you, Taejin SSI." A chime sounded in the room, clean and cold. The door slid open. Outside, the hallway was bright. It was time. Taejin placed his helmet back on his head, his face disappearing behind the dark visor once more. He was the guard again. He gestured with a gloved hand. "This way." Myri straightened her shoulders. She held the woven charm tightly in her fist, hidden from view. She thought of her father's hum in the greenhouse, of the quiet, smooth note Kale had faded into. She did not think of the beam. She took a step, and then another, walking past Taejin and into the bright, empty hall. The execution chamber was a perfect sphere. The walls, floor, and ceiling were the same seamless, pale gray material. It was like being inside a giant, sterile ball bearing. There were no visible lights, but the space was filled with a shadowless, sourceless glow. In the very center of the floor was a single black circle, 2 meters wide. It was the only feature in the entire room. Myri stood just inside the entrance, the door whispering shut behind her. Taejin remained outside, a silent gray sentinel now. Before her, the black circle looked like a hole, a doorway to nothing. She had to walk to it. Her legs felt heavy, as if the air had turned thick. Around the upper curve of the sphere, just below where the wall met the ceiling, a ring of observation windows appeared. They had been perfectly camouflaged before. Now they glowed softly, revealing dark shapes behind them. The council members or their aides watching from a safe, removed distance. She could not see their faces. They were just silhouettes. From a speaker somewhere in the walls, a calm, androgynous voice spoke in Galactic Common. "The execution broadcast is now live. All member worlds are receiving the signal." Somewhere, on screens across 1,000 planets, her image was now appearing. In Kirixi Stone Cities, in Pell Aquatic Halls, in Human Outpost Mess Halls. A teenage girl in a gray jumpsuit, alone in a gray sphere. Ambassador Vale's voice filled the chamber, chiming and solemn. "People of the Galactic Council. Today justice is served. The human Myri violated the sacred silence of the Kirixi, a most profound crime. This action was not a simple mistake. It was a violent assertion of human emotionalism over sacred law. If left unpunished, such acts will spread chaos. They will erode the foundations of our peaceful coexistence. This execution is a necessity. It is a message. Your customs, your sacred spaces are protected. The galaxy has order." The words washed over Myri. They felt distant, like a speech about someone else. Her heart was a frantic bird in her chest, but her mind was focused on a single, simple point: her hand. She could feel the edges of the woven made-up charm pressing into her palm. It was a tiny point of reality. "The condemned may proceed to the designated termination point," the calm wall voice instructed. She had to move. If she did not move, they would force her. She did not want to be forced. She wanted to walk. It was the last choice she would have. She took a step, then another. The floor was firm and smooth. Her soft-soled shoes made no sound. The black circle grew larger. With each step, the observation windows seemed to press in, the silent watchers above feeling heavier. She thought of her father. She hoped someone had told him. She hoped he was not watching. She reached the edge of the black circle. It was not a hole, just a different colored material. She stepped into its center. Felt no different. She turned to face the main observation window, a larger one directly opposite the entrance. She assumed the important people were there. "Final words are permitted for the record," the wall voice said. The protocol was cold, but absolute. Myri looked up. She could not see who she was speaking to, but she knew a camera lens was focused on her face. It would be a close-up transmitted everywhere. She swallowed. Her mouth was dry. She thought of Kale, the Carixi elder, alone in the dust. She thought of the fear in his subsonic hum. She thought of the quiet that followed. She did not speak to the council. She did not speak to Ambassador Vale. She looked directly into the unseen camera, imagining the faces of all the people of all the species watching this. Her voice, when it came, was clear. It did not shake. It was simple in basic galactic common. "I am sorry if my touch caused pain." She paused, making sure each word was understood. "I only meant to say, you are not alone." That was all. She had nothing else. No grand defense. No curse. Just an apology for the unintended hurt and a statement of her simple, unchangeable purpose. In the observation booth he had been ordered to occupy, Min heard her words. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Her small voice, so clear in the vast, dead space, was worse than any scream. It was the sound of a humanity the galaxy would never understand, and was about to erase. Ambassador Vale made a soft, chiming sound of disapproval. "Sentiment as weapon. The statement proves the contamination. Proceed." A low hum began to build in the chamber. It was a physical vibration in the air, coming from above. Myri looked up. At the very top of the sphere, a hexagonal panel had slid open. A device, cold and metallic, descended a few meters. It looked like a dark, complex eye. It began to glow with a sickly, greenish-white light at its core. The energy emitter. It charged with a rising whine that set her teeth on edge. This was it. The efficient thing. She closed her eyes tightly. She held the image of her father's face. She held the feeling of the red sun on Xylos. She held the memory of Kale's fear finally softening into peace. She squeezed the woven charm in her hand so hard the cords cut into her skin. The whine reached its highest pitch. The light from above became blinding, focused into a single terrible point aimed at the top of her head. "Execute," said the wall voice. A beam of pure, crackling energy lanced down from the emitter. It was not a slow ray. It was an instant, violent bolt, designed to flash disrupt every neural pathway in her body at once. It struck the air 1 meter above Myri's head. And it stopped. A shimmering, translucent dome of silver light flickered into existence, covering her like a perfect bubble. The deadly energy splashed against it, flaring in a spectacle of harmless sparks before dissipating into the air. The dome held, steady and impossible. The hum died. The emitter's light faded. The chamber was silent again, save for a faint, electric sizzle. Myri, who had braced for nothingness, slowly opened her eyes. She was still standing. She felt nothing but the pounding of her own heart. She looked up, saw the fading glow of the beam against the silver dome, and then saw the dome itself, wavering like heat haze. In the observation windows, the silhouettes shifted. Confusion. Movement. Then, every surface in the chamber, the walls, the floor, even the inside of the protective dome, flickered. The bland gray was replaced by a frantic, scrolling waterfall of text, numbers, and symbols. The calm wall voice crackled and was replaced by a young, tense human male voice. "Oops," the new voice said, the words echoing through the sphere and, undoubtedly, through every broadcast feed in the galaxy. "Looks like your signal's been hijacked." The silence that followed the word "oops" was absolute. Inside her shimmering bubble, Myri stood frozen, her hands still clenched around the charm. The energy emitter above her retracted with a mechanical whir, disappearing into the ceiling. The dome of light around her pulsed softly, casting a silver glow on her face. Then, the chamber walls, now massive screens, exploded with information. It was not an attack. There were no weapons firing, No dramatic declarations of war. It was a flood. A tidal wave of data, silent and overwhelming, began to fill the spherical room and, as the hijacker had promised, every public and private screen tuned to the execution broadcast across the Galactic Council's domain. The first thing to appear was a simple line of text, clear and white against the chaotic background scroll. Source: Freighter Morningstar, Human Registry, Cargo, Data. Then the data floods focused, organized. It became a presentation. On the left wall, personal security footage began to play. Grainy, intimate moments. Myri, looking younger, on her home outpost. She was sitting in a common area with a young Pell child, their gelatinous body shifting colors with anxiety. Myri was slowly, carefully, showing the child how to fold a piece of paper into a simple boat. The child's colors softened to a calm blue. The clip ended. A tag appeared, Pell Juvenile BLI, diagnosed with separation anxiety. Human contact protocol, nonverbal, creative focus. Outcome, positive. Another clip. Myri in the outpost's tiny medical bay, holding the limb of a wounded Toltec miner. The miner was growling in pain, his bony ridges flared. Myri was not providing medical aid. A drone was doing that. She was simply applying steady, firm pressure to his arm, her expression one of calm focus. The Toltec's growls slowly subsided into ragged breaths. Toltec miner Grak, suffering traumatic fracture. Human contact protocol, grounding pressure. Outcome, pain perception reduced by 18%. The clips were short, mundane, and devastating. They showed a catalog of quiet moments. A human engineer named Sue sharing her lunch with a lonely Carixi scholar. A man named Gene humming a tune to soothe a frightened animal species from a trade ship. Each clip was tagged, analyzed not for emotional content but as behavioral data. It was a library of small, unauthorized acts of connection. On the right wall, text logs and audio recordings began to stream. Private messages, stolen from the supposedly secure council servers. A Carixi mother messaging another. The human child sat with my eldest during the storm fear. She said nothing, just sat. The tremors stopped. I do not understand it, but the silence was not broken. It was filled. A Pell administrator writing in a log. Request. Assign human day to archiving duty near the nursery tanks. His consistent presence lowers agitation rates in the juveniles. It is an efficiency. A Toltec warrior, in a gruff audio diary. The human nurse Sora. She looked at my injury, not my rank. Said, "That looks like it hurts." No one has said that before. It did hurt. It hurt less after. Then, the center wall displayed the coup de grace. It was the raw, unedited audio from the street on Xylos, from the Carixi elder, Kale. It was not from Myri's translator. It was from a private recorder belonging to Kale's own granddaughter, secreted in her own robe. The audio was cleaned, amplified. The subsonic frequencies of the dying Carixi were translated into audible galactic common. The sounds were not of peace or sacred silence. They were pulses of terror, confusion, and profound loneliness. A rising, desperate whine. Then, a new sound entered the recording. A soft, steady hum. Myri's own breathing, and the faint bioacoustic whisper of a human circulatory system. A sound most species could subconsciously detect. The chaotic Carixi pulses began to slow, to synchronize with the steady human rhythm. The fear whine dropped in pitch, softened. The final moments were not silent, but a coordinated, gentle duet. The fading Carixi frequencies and the steady human hum. Then, a last, clear Carixi subvocalization, parsed by the hacker's superior software. With gratitude. Not alone. Silence in the recording. A final tag appeared on the screen. Analysis. Contact not a violation. Contact was a palliative solution to observed distress. Cultural law misinterpreted situational data. In her observation booth, Min was standing again, his hands pressed against the viewing glass. His mind was reeling. This wasn't a rescue by soldiers. It was a revelation by archivists. They hadn't attacked the Council's weapons. They had attacked its narrative. The young male voice crackled back over the speakers, less tense now, almost clinical. You see, the human emotional contamination vector wasn't a future threat. It was a present condition, a beneficial one. For the past 3 standard cycles, an average of 4,217 unsupervised, cross-species empathetic interactions have occurred daily in Council-controlled space. We just mapped the network. A galaxy map flickered onto every screen. A million tiny, glowing points of light. Each was a logged interaction. Lines connected them. A sprawling, luminous web linking every species, every world. It was beautiful and undeniable. The web was thickest around human outposts and ships, but it stretched everywhere. The execution of Myri wasn't justice, a new voice said. Female this time. It was Sora. It was surgery. You were trying to cut out a symptom, but the disease is already in the bloodstream. It's called mutual aid. We just gave the galaxy its own chart. Back in the spherical chamber, the protective dome around Myri flickered and vanished. She stood unharmed in the black circle, bathed in the cool light of 1 trillion data points telling her story. She looked small, not as a criminal, but as a single data point in a pattern so large it changed everything. The observation windows were no longer dark. She could see movement, panic, stunned stillness. The silhouettes were no longer just watchers. They were witnesses to their own misunderstanding. The male hacker, Day, spoke one last time, his voice echoing in the new, data-filled silence of the chamber and the galaxy. The broadcast is yours again, Council. But the truth is everyone's. What you do with it is your next choice. We'll be watching. Morning star out. The walls went dark. The chamber returned to its sterile, pale gray. But nothing was the same. The air itself felt charged, heavy with the echo of 1 million private moments suddenly made public. Myri stood alone in the quiet, the woven charm still warm in her hand, waiting for the world outside the sphere to catch up to what had just happened inside it. The silence inside the execution sphere was total. But outside, in the corridors and control rooms and observation decks of the Council station, chaos erupted. Alarms that were meant for external threats blared uselessly. Guards moved without clear orders. Communications consoles lit up with 1,000 incoming signals at once. In the main observation gallery, the silence was different. It was the stunned, heavy quiet of a foundation cracking. The Council members were no longer silhouettes. The opaque shielding on the windows had dropped in the system-wide confusion, revealing their faces. The Pell representative drifted listlessly in its fluid. The Toltec's bony ridges were clamped tight to its skull. Many simply stared at the empty gray sphere where the human girl still stood, alive. Ambassador Vale of the Carixi was not looking at the sphere. Vale was staring at the space where the hacked data had been displayed. The final audio played in the ambassador's mind on a loop, the translated subvocalization of the elder. Gratitude, not alone. The sacred, solitary passing had been a lonely torment, and the human child had ended it. This truth was a physical blow. Min saw his chance. He slammed his hand on the comm panel in his booth, his voice cutting through the station's general address system. It was a breach of protocol, but protocol was already dead. This is human attaché Min. The sentence has been carried out. The method failed. The condemned remains alive under Council custody. I invoke Galactic Statute 2 Beta. Any irreversible sentence must be reviewed if its factual basis is materially challenged. He spoke fast, his words formal but his tone urgent. The presented evidence materially challenges the facts. I demand the immediate revocation of the execution order and the release of Myri into my protective custody, pending a full judicial review. His voice echoed down the sterile halls. For a moment there was no response. Then other voices began to join on the channel. First, the Pell representative, its bubbling voice slow. The evidence of beneficial interaction is considerable. My government will not support a second attempt. Then, a gravelly Toltec voice. The Carixi elder's own testimony changes the nature of the crime. If there was no crime, there is no sentence. The human is correct. Revoke the order. The dam was breaking. Other species, who had voted red out of political fear or cold logic, now hesitated. The public broadcast had not just been seen by them. It had been seen by their people. The pressure was already rolling in from a billion homeworlds. Vale finally moved. The Carixi ambassador turned from the window. The chime of Vale's voice was hollow, stripped of its earlier certainty. The Carixi delegation withdraws the demand for execution. The spiritual assessment was incomplete. It was the closest to an admission of error the species had ever given in public. The chamber seemed to let out a collective, held breath. On the floor of the execution sphere, the door hissed open. Teijin stood there, helmet still in his hands. He did not enter. He simply nodded to her. It was over. Myri stepped out of the black circle. Her legs felt weak, but she walked. Each step away from that spot felt like a miracle. She reached the doorway. Teijin fell into step beside her, not as a guard escorting a prisoner, but as a protector. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "To the attaché. To your people," he said. They moved through corridors that were now buzzing with frantic energy. Council aides rushed past, arguing. Screens displayed not official news, but chaotic public forums from a dozen worlds. The visual of the galaxy-spanning web of connections was being rebroadcast, analyzed, celebrated, and condemned. They arrived at a secure diplomatic dock. Min was there, speaking quickly with a flustered council official. He turned as Myri approached. His professional composure broke for a second. His shoulders sagged with relief, and he gave her a shaky nod. "The order is formally revoked. You are released. We are leaving on the first available shuttle," Min said. He looked at Teijin. "Guard, your duty is discharged." "Thank you." Teijin shook his head. "My duty to the station is discharged. My duty is not." He looked at Myri. "I will see you to your ship. It is not secure here yet." He was right. The shift was not clean. It was messy and dangerous. Not everyone would accept the new story. As they boarded a small, human-licensed transport shuttle, they could see on the dock view screens that the story was already evolving. On Carixi news channels, scholars were fiercely debating the nature of the sacred silence. Was it about physical isolation or spiritual peace? The testimony of Kale's granddaughter, now speaking publicly, was tipping the scales. "My grandsire died in peace because of the human," she chimed, her image broadcast widely. Who are we to call that a crime? On Pell channels, communities were sharing their own stories of small human kindnesses, once hidden, now shared with pride. On human networks, there was a stunned, cautious jubilation. And a name was being repeated, the Morning Star. Inside the shuttle, as it detached from the station, Myri finally sank into a seat. She looked out the viewport at the immense station, a place of cold order that had just been turned upside down by a single, simple truth. She unclenched her fist. The red and blue woven made-up was imprinted in her palm. She held it up, the tiny knot swaying gently. "They did it," Min said, sitting across from her, watching the station shrink. "The hackers, they didn't fire a shot. They just told the truth," Myri said softly. "It was the same thing today," Teijin murmured from the pilot's seat, inputting coordinates. The shuttle pushed away from the ordered chaos of the council station, heading for a rendezvous point in deep space. Behind them, the galaxy was no longer what it had been 27 minutes before. It wasn't a war. It was a conversation, starting everywhere at once, loud, confused, and alive. And for the first time, the main subject of that conversation was not power or law, but the simple, terrifying, wonderful question of what it meant to be not alone. The shuttle was a small, functional craft meant for short trips between stations. Its interior was gray and smelled of recycled air and engine coolant. To Myri, it felt like a palace. She sat in a passenger seat, her fingers tracing the edges of the woven charm she had tied to a thin cord around her wrist. Min was across from her, staring at a blank data screen, still processing. Teijin guided the ship with quiet efficiency. No one spoke, The adrenaline that had carried them was draining away, leaving behind a deep, shaking exhaustion. Myri watched the stars, hard and steady points of light against the endless dark. They did not look any different, but she knew the galaxy behind them was now a different place. Taejin broke the silence. We have a rendezvous coordinate, a deep space location. The signal came from the morning star. Min blinked, coming back to the present. The hackers? They want to meet. It appears so, Taejin said. The message was brief. It just gave the location and said, for debrief and safety. Myri felt a flicker of anxiety. Were these new people also going to see her as a symbol, a tool? She just wanted to see her father. She wanted to sit in the greenhouse and hear him hum. After a few hours of silent travel, a ship appeared on the scanner. It was not impressive. The Morning Star was an old Class K freighter, its hull scuffed and patched in places. It looked like 1,000 other workhorse ships hauling goods through the fringe systems. It was the last thing you would imagine capable of hacking the Galactic Council. A comm channel chirped open. The young male voice from the broadcast filled the shuttle cabin. Shuttle, this is Morning Star. You are clear to dock in our main bay. No weapons, please. We're not very good with them. Taejin glanced at Min, who nodded. We are unarmed, Taejin responded. He guided the shuttle towards the freighter's open bay doors. They drifted inside, and the doors closed behind them with a solid thunk. The bay was cluttered with old storage containers and spare parts. The air was cooler here, and smelled of oil and ozone. As the shuttle's ramp lowered, 2 figures stood waiting. One was a young man, maybe in his early 20s. He was tall and thin, with hair that fell into his eyes. He wore simple glasses and a faded shirt with the logo of a deep space survey team. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, his fingers tapping a silent rhythm on his leg. This was Day. Next to him stood a young woman, his sister Sora. She was a few years older, with a calm, watchful face and her hair tied back in a practical knot. She wore a simple flight suit. Her stance was steady, but her eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of the shuttle and its occupants as they descended the ramp. Myri stepped down first, with Min and Taejin just behind her. For a moment, they all just looked at each other. The people who had caused a galactic shift and the girl at the center of it. Day broke the quiet. He pointed a finger at Myri, his expression one of intense focus. You held your hand at a 34-degree angle to the Carixi Elder's carapace seam. That was optimal for microvibration transfer. Did you know that? Myri stared, completely bewildered. No. I was just holding his arm. Day nodded rapidly. Instinctual. Fascinating. The data suggests human tactile empathy has a biomechanical optimization component we hadn't fully modeled. Sora elbowed her brother gently. Day. Manners. She stepped forward, her gaze softening as she looked at Myri. What he means is, thank you. Your action gave us the perfect data point. It was the key that made the whole pattern undeniable. Min found his diplomatic voice. What you did was extraordinary and incredibly dangerous. Sora shrugged. Sitting there was dangerous too. We were archivists on a council census project. We saw the data streams, the private messages, the logs. We saw the pattern of human contact and the positive outcome tag species were putting in their own private files. The council's public database showed only the conflicts, like with the Carixi. It was a curated truth. We just uncured it. Day's eyes lit up. It was an information architecture problem. They had the data siloed. We just cross-referenced the emotional reciprocity logs with the public incident reports. The correlation was -0.89. Human interference almost always reduced distress. He spoke as if it was simple. You exposed private communications, Taejin said, his voice low. That has consequences. Sora met his gaze. So does an execution based on a lie. We chose the lesser harm. We broadcast only anonymized data and positive interactions. No secrets, just goodness. The galaxy needed to see its own better nature. Myri finally found her voice. How did you stop the beam? Day smiled. A quick, bright thing. Oh, that. We didn't hack the emitter. Too hard, too many failsafes. We hacked the station's internal sensor grid 1 week ago. We told it there was a catastrophic containment leak in that chamber. The station's own safety systems threw up a grade 5 containment field around you the microsecond before the beam fired. It was the station that saved you. It just thought it was stopping radiation. The simplicity of it was breathtaking. They hadn't fought the system. They had tricked it into protecting her. Min shook his head in amazement. And now? The council will be looking for you. Sora nodded. We know. The Morning Star will disappear. We have other work to do. The data web, the made-up net as people are calling it, is self-sustaining now. It doesn't need us. She looked at Myri. But you should go home. Be with your family. You have given enough. Myri felt a weight lift at those words. She looked at the two siblings, these strange, brilliant people who had weaponized truth. Thank you, she said, the words feeling too small. For everything. Day adjusted his glasses. You are welcome. Your biometric readings during the event were also very interesting. The calmness. Could we have a copy of your medical logs for Day? Sora said, her tone fond but firm. She looked back at the group. We will send you the coordinates for the nearest human Starlane gate. Your people are waiting for you there. As they turned to go back to their shuttle, Myri called out. Wait! She walked up to Sora and held out the woven charm on her wrist. For good luck. To tie to your ship. Sora looked at the small, intricate knot. She took it with a solemn nod. We will keep it safe. She gave Myri's shoulder a brief, firm squeeze, a touch of solidarity, and then the siblings turned and walked back into the shadows of their cluttered ship. Back on the shuttle, as they prepared to leave the Morning Star behind, Myri looked out at the old, patched freighter. It didn't look like a galaxy-changing ship. It looked like home for two people who saw a pattern and decided to share it. As their shuttle drifted out into the open stars again, she felt a new kind of calm. The fight was over. The journey home could begin. The journey home was quiet. The small shuttle, now cleared for travel on a human diplomatic pass, moved steadily through the star lanes. Min spent most of the time on the comm, speaking in low tones with his superiors, trying to explain the unexplainable. Taejin focused on piloting, a silent and steady presence. Myri slept, a deep, dreamless sleep of pure exhaustion. When she woke, they were approaching the gate to her home sector. On the view screen, a familiar, rusty-looking deep space relay station came into view, and docked beside it, she saw a simple, boxy horticulture transport ship. The Green Sprout, her father's ship. Her breath caught. She was out of her seat before the shuttle had finished docking procedures, pressing her hands against the viewport. Min came to stand beside her. They've been waiting here for 2 days, he said gently. The whole outpost wanted to come, but we thought it should be small. The shuttle docked with a soft clang. The airlock door hissed open. Myri didn't wait. She stepped through. The docking bay of the relay station was cold and bare, but standing in the middle of it was her father, Junsu. He looked older than she remembered. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face drawn with a fear that was only now beginning to melt away. He wore his old work clothes, stained with plant soil. For a second, they just looked at each other. Then Myri ran. He opened his arms and caught her, pulling her into a tight, silent hug. He didn't say anything. He just held her, his chin resting on the top of her head, his shoulders shaking. She buried her face in his shirt, smelling the familiar sense of soil and green things and home. All the strength she had held onto leaked away, and she cried, great heaving sobs of relief. Finally, he pulled back, holding her face in his rough, gentle hands. My brave, foolish girl, he whispered, his voice thick. You held his hand. She nodded, unable to speak. I would have done the same, he said, and that simple statement meant more than any pardon. Over her father's shoulder, she saw others from the outpost. Mrs. Lee from the commissary, old Mr. Park the engineer. They stood back, giving them space, their faces full of a quiet, fierce pride. They had seen the broadcast. They knew what she had done. Min and Taejin stepped out of the shuttle. Junsu released Myri and walked to Min, taking his hand in both of his. "Thank you for bringing her home." Min shook his head. "I didn't do anything. She saved herself. They all did." He glanced at Taejin, who gave a small, respectful nod. Taejin then approached Myri. He held out his hand. In his palm was a small, plain data chip. "The station released your personal effects. This is the chip from your translator. It has the original recordings from Xylos. I thought you might want it." Myri took the chip, felt cold. "What will you do now?" she asked him. Taejin looked around the simple bay, at the faces of the humans. "The council guard has requested my resignation. I think I am done with order for a while. Perhaps I will find a quieter job." He paused. "My daughter will be glad to know her charm worked." He gave a final, slight bow, then turned and walked back into the shuttle with Min. Their part in the story was over. They had other reports to file, other fires to put out in the shifting galaxy. A few hours later, Myri sat in the small, warm kitchen of the Green Sprout. Her father made her tea. The familiar hum of the ship's life support was the only sound. She felt stretched thin like glass. On the kitchen table's small view screen, a news feed played silently. It showed images from across the galaxy. Not of war, but of debate. Carixi forums lit up with philosophical arguments. The Galactic Council was an emergency session, not to condemn, but to debate new cross-cultural contact protocols. The word empathy was being used in official translations. A different graphic appeared. It was a simple, user-created interface. A galaxy map, but instead of political borders, it flickered with soft, interconnected lights. At the top were 3 galactic common words. The made-up net. A subtitle flashed. Ask, offer, connect. She saw a public post from a Toltec on a mining asteroid. Isolation shift. Anyone for a comms game of Go. A human on a far-flung station answered, "I'll teach you poker." A Pell adolescent posted, "Anxiety frequency is high, seeking calm resonance." A Carixi elder, identified as a music scholar, responded with a simple audio file, a low, soothing chime sequence. It was messy. It was unsanctioned. It was alive. The galaxy was not united, but it was talking in a way it never had before. They were talking about loneliness and fear, and the simple, practical need for a hand to hold in the dark. Junsu put the tea down and looked at the screen. "So much noise," he said softly. "It's not noise, Appa," Myri said, her voice quiet but clear. She touched the woven charm on her wrist. "It's the sound of people making sure no one has to be alone again." He sat beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. They watched the screen. A new message popped up, from a human botanist on a distant world. "Zillion mold is thriving. It just needed a specific vibration. Sharing the frequency data for all." A Carixi scientist, from the same world, replied, "Your data is incomplete. Pair it with this soil log. We will solve this together." Myri leaned her head on her father's shoulder. The galaxy had shifted. It had not been conquered by weapons or by speeches. It had been changed by a held hand, by a map of kindness, by a knot of string meant for luck. The great, cold engine of galactic politics was now trying to catch up to a simple truth that had already taken root in a million hearts. She was home. She was safe. And light years away, on a silent freighter and on 1,000 bustling worlds, the conversation she had started with a single touch was just beginning. It was a gentle shift, profound one, and it was finally good.